Hello, Johan. I got your message on YouTube concerning the 190SL that you've been dealing with, your friend in Germany while you're in Belgium. I'll see if I can go over a few things that might help you out. And we're going to start with some basics. First thing, you indicated you've got good compression, 8 to 10 atmospheres, which is acceptable. That should be enough compression to create enough vacuum to open up the second barrel on the Solexes. But even before then, you indicated that the intake valve, the intake camshaft lobe was hitting the rocker arm. Well, that's a problem because the engine's been worked on, and your clearances are not quite the same as they used to be. So I'm going to discuss that. Move the camera here a little bit, but I just want to also make mention of the fact that the screw that holds down the valve cover. I'm sorry, not the screw, the bolt that holds down the valve cover. Make sure that everybody realizes that this is a specific length. That's a 28 millimeter bolt specifically for holding on the valve cover. And if it isn't 28 millimeter, what happens is that bolt will go down and hit the camshaft, and it'll make a ticking noise as if you've got an engine problem. So make sure everybody with the 190SLs has got a 28 millimeter bolt. Let's see. Now then, when you rotate your engine and you check for clearance between the cam lobe and the adjusting screw, eyeballing it is not good enough. What you need to do is get out your feeler gauges and take a 2000s feeler gauge and put it between the cam lobe and the adjusting screw and the nut. As you can see down here, let's go down to this one. Here's a little bit better picture. Let's see. Let's go over here. Okay, this one's right around, coming right around, and you can see we got plenty of clearance between the camshaft and the adjusting screw and nut. But if there's any question about it, use your feeler gauge and use like a very small, thin one. Maybe, I guess in metric would be a 0.1 maybe. Let's see, what would that be? What is, yeah, 0.1 or 0.12, something like that. 4 to 5 thousandths in SAE. All right, so now we're going to go over here and discuss what led to your valve, your camshaft hitting the rocker arm. And that is the problem with put my feeler gauges back up. That's a problem with the valve being sunk too deep into the head, and thereby the tip of the valve here is going to contact your going to push up too far here on your rocker arm, on this rocker arm, and then that's going to make everything contact move up too close to the camshaft, and the camshaft hit right here. And so what you've got to do is, when the machine work is done, like you face the valve or machine the seats right here, be sure to tip the valve to remove material at this point, so that when the valve goes in there, it doesn't go too far up. Let's move this around. So when the valve is in place, all right, the valve doesn't go up so far that it pushes the rocker arm too high up, and the rocker arm contacts the camshaft. Now then, that's part of that's going to be the removing material from the valve and sinking the valve deeper into the cylinder head. The valve is supposed to sit about 60 thousandths. You can do the conversion to metric, but valve should sit about 60 thousandths below the parting surface of the cylinder head, right here. Another thing that's going to affect your camshaft or rocker arm clearance, of course, is the thickness of the cylinder head, because as the cylinder head gets thinner and you sink the valves deeper into the head, the valve is going to come up and contact the camshaft. So you start off with an 85 millimeter thickness head, and you can go down to 84 millimeters, and every time you remove material and then cut the valve seats, the valve is going to go up closer to the camshaft. And if you haven't done anything to keep the camshaft away from the crankshaft, there's going to be interference, and the camshaft away from the rocker arms. But also that has to do with your camshaft, your timing, your crank to cam timing, and that's a critical item. So we've got your specifications right here. The minimum amount of material that you can remove from the top of the block is right here, and the cylinder head here is the minimum amount of material that you can remove. So as you machine or mill the top of the block, and you mill and machine the bottom of the cylinder head, that moves the camshaft and the crankshaft closer together, and that's going to affect your timing. So what you want to do is to get the camshaft away from the crankshaft and get that spacing back where it's supposed to be. And what we do to affect that are these shims right here that go underneath the camshaft and physically raise it up and get it away from the crankshaft. So your spacing that you're supposed to have is maintained. There is a set distance between the crankshaft and the camshaft, and I don't have that piece of paper with me, but it's in the TDM, Technical Data Manual, and you can look it up. But that's not critical because nobody has a micrometer big enough to measure it. So what you want to do is pay attention to how much material has been removed from the cylinder head, and if any's been removed from the top of the block. And what you do is you take that measurement, and then you get the appropriate thickness of shims. Well, these are aluminum, but you can make them out of brass, shim stock, stainless steel, whatever that you want, and put on there as many as you need within reason to get the, what am I doing here? There you go. Get the camshaft back where it needs to be. You can also use these to level the camshaft with respect to the head. If someone has milled the head incorrectly and it's warped, you can put different numbers of these in order to keep the camshaft in alignment. So that's, and you'll know that by the fact that once you bolt down the camshaft with all three towers in place, you should be able to rotate the camshaft just with a few fingers. If you can't, then you've got a camshaft that's binding. Now that's to get the eliminate your problem with the rocker arms hitting the camshaft, and also this will get your timing back to where it's supposed to be, ignition timing and camshaft, crankshaft timing. Very critical. Now then, let's go over here, and you are having trouble getting the vacuum secondaries to open on this 190 SL in Germany. So let's go through some basics, and I know you don't need these basics, but I'm going to give the information just in case there's other people watching. So what we've got to worry about here is your intake bolted to the cylinder head, and you've got the Siamese intake with the cast iron exhaust, and the problem is that sometimes the common washer holding these together does not produce enough pressure on the aluminum to hold it tightly. So what you need to do is grab your carburetors and physically see if you can pull up on them, pick up or move them. And you can even do this while it's idling and spray carburetor cleaner or some WD-40, something like that, down along this parting surface right here. And as you pick up on the carburetor, see if the idle changes. And what I do to fix that is, if there's what happens is the aluminum migrates with that common washer tightly up against it. The aluminum migrates and thins out, and so what you do is you put a half DIN 137 washer cut in half and use that as a shim, and that will take up the slack and make sure that you've got pressure on the intake manifold. Obviously, another issue are the carburetor mounting gaskets right here. Make sure that they're installed correctly. And you got new rubbers right there. And back to the carburetors themselves. Now, what I described to you earlier, what I was trying to tell you is, if you want to artificially operate the second barrel while the engine's idling, what you do is you, at the same time as you close the choke, you also increase the throttle and force the engine to produce a very high vacuum internally. And so the engine is trying to die because of the choke, and you're trying to keep it running, accelerating as much as you can. And once you produce that artificial high vacuum inside the intake manifold, the vacuum signal will come from here and around to the vacuum cell, and you'll be able to watch the second barrel open up. Now, obviously, you've already checked, as we know, to make sure that the second barrel is moving properly. As you can see, it has a little vacuum action to it, a little slow closing, but it does close. If the car is not used aggressively and the RPM gets above 3,000 RPM, the second barrels have a tendency to stick closed. They will build up fuel inside the throat, and that fuel buildup will actually freeze or stick the second barrel butterfly closed. And sometimes it's been so bad that you have to take the carburetors off and dismantle them and soak them to break the adhesion from the dried out gasoline. The gasoline we're getting is so poor that the stuff evaporates and leaves a residue that's just evil. So that's another thing you got to watch out for, is long-term sitting around. Now then, let's go discuss the carburetors and the check valves that I was mentioning to you earlier. Okay, the check valve that I was mentioning to you, it has to do with the vacuum secondary, is this check valve right here. It screws in here, and your vacuum tube comes across here and goes into this check valve. There is a little teeny ball in there, and that sticks sometimes, and other times it sticks closed, or it sticks open and it sticks closed. Just depends on its mood. They get worn. They take a set to them, and anyway, that's a problem area right there. So if you're not getting vacuum to your cell here, but you had said you're going to use your hand operated pump to check vacuum going into the cell and vacuum cell operation. The other check valve that I was describing to you is the one that's inside the float bowl. Let me get a light. And you said you were familiar with this one. Okay, that's that little teeny thing right down there, the little brass check valve. And I'll show you about that. Those are very straightforward to remove, and they need to be replaced because they also get a set, or they get dirty or just worn out. And what you do is you tap it from the inside out. So, tapped it. You can see it coming out. Here it is coming out that side, and just tap it out the rest of the way with a smaller punch. Okay, that's why I say you've got to take apart the carburetors in order to replace this little check valve, because the check valve comes out from the inside down to the bottom, but it installs from the bottom going back in, and that's because it's on a taper. This is tapered, so that's how you take it out, and that's how you install it. And those need to be replaced periodically, and I've got those in stock, and we rebuild those or have new ones. So those are the things that I can think of that would affect the vacuum. And of course this has to do with acceleration. In fact, while we're here, if you get dripping out of the accelerator pump discharge nozzle, let's get that out of the way. So if you have dripping coming out of the accelerator discharge nozzle, what you're gonna, but the problem is either going to be the check valve I just installed in the float bowl or this check valve right here, and either one or both will make it to where this drips all the time, and you'll have what's called a rolling miss. That's another area that needs to be addressed. So you can't have fuel dripping from this unless, I mean at any time, no fuel should be dripping from this. The only time you get fuel is when it's on demand for the accelerator pump to accelerate the car. And another thing, these should be adjusted so the needle jet of fuel goes straight down the throat of the carburetor. Now, let's see if that helps a little bit in terms of your problem with the second barrels not opening, because it's obviously a vacuum issue and you just got to figure out why you're not producing enough vacuum. Hope this helps a little bit. Good luck.